Hello everyone, just picked up this supplement to Lion Rampant, which is called A Viking in the Sun, and I thought I'd give the rules a go, as I have a lot of suitable figures for this period. More on that in a moment. So as I say, this is a supplement to an original Osprey set of rules that you're probably familiar with. I think they've been around about 6 or 7 years now. Lion Rampant, Medieval Wargaming Rules by Daniel Mercy. I have played this game a fair amount, but not a huge amount. I tend to kind of fluctuate between rules that require singly based figures and rules that require multiple base figures. You can use multi-based figures with Lion Rampant, but it's not particularly satisfactory because you can't remove individual casualties, obviously, and you have to mark the stands in some way. So I have, as I say, I have played it, but my preference is for larger scale combats. This really is a game for 30 or 40 figures per side, something like that. And of course the one rules set that I'm really big on that favours that number of figures is Saga. And it's been a long time since I've played Saga, primarily because it's difficult to play it solo. I would say impossible, but some people say they play it solo, but I just don't see how you can, because you have to be in your opponent's mind as well when you're playing Saga, and try and understand what their intentions are with the dice that they've got on the battle board, and that automatically when you're playing solo, so it kind of detracts from the game. But anyway, that's another topic. But Lion Rampant is a good game to play solo, and as I say, I have got lots of figures that I use for Saga, and some of them include figures that are suitable for this period. Now, what is a Viking in the Sun? Viking in the Sun is sort of set in the period sort of mid 11th century, so just prior to the First Crusade, really, and it revolves around the central character of Harald Hardrada, who of course met his end at the Battle of Stamford Gate in 1066, when he invaded England in the north, just prior to William the Conqueror's invasion in the south. And prior to that, Harald Hardrada had actually built up his wealth and influence and military experience, etc., by serving in the Varangian Guard in the Byzantine Empire. And this book really features those sort of settings. So the Middle East, Sicily, southern Italy. So I have got factions for Normans to fight in southern Italy. I've got lots of Varangian Guard. I've got a Byzantine faction that I purchased pre-painted, which is rather lovely, which I'm going to show you later. The book itself isn't by, even though it looks like an Osprey publication. I mean, there are the two side by side. You can see how it's clearly kind of referencing Osprey publications. I mean, it's basically a supplement to an Osprey War Games rulebook. But this has been produced published by the University of Edinburgh, and it's I think they call themselves, it's got it here, Yeah, the History and Games Lab. They already have had one supplement to Lion Rampant produced, which is based in the Crusader states. Again, I have lots of figures for that, but I've got them all multi-basing at the moment, so I never picked up this this rule set. But this one, as I say, particularly interested in this because I can play it. But the History and Games Lab is these three people here, mainly Gianluca Raccagni, James Holloway, and Daniel Mercy. Daniel Mercy being the author of the original Lion Rampant's rules, amongst many others. And as you can see, it's published by the University of Edinburgh and not Osprey War Games, but you'd be forgiven for thinking it is an Osprey book. However, it is a lot more weighty. I don't know what the word is without. I'm not trying to be disparaging to Osprey books, but it has a lot more kind of. It's like an Osprey book, say one that you would buy for getting information about uniform details and so on, to know how to paint your figures. So it's like that, except that rather than having details of costumes and so on, it has a lot of the background of the history, and then it has the supplements to the rules. So what it's trying to do is give you rules that are appropriate to the history and the events of Harald Hardrada's career in the Mediterranean and the Levant. So it has lots of new tactics and so on, and upgrades that you can buy. Shield wall, feigned retreat, javelins for cavalry, religious fervour. This one here, fearsome, is one that he recommends for the Varangian Guard and so on. And they all work in relation to the original rule set, so they are all additional kind of upgrades and so on that you can use. Hand grenades, Greek fire, lots of things like that. But there is also there are also new characters that you can introduce. So there are leaders, and they, rather than rolling for them in a random way, which you do with Lion Rampant, they come with their preset characteristics, so you don't get any kind of incompetent leaders or anything. So more on that again in a moment. And they also they also define the troop types in terms of the original kind of categories in Lion Rampant. So there's a kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like a conversion chart, if you like. So you can see elite cavalry, which is the way they're described in the army lists in this book, refer to mounted men at arms in the core book and so on. So it's very easy to work out what the armour and attack values, movement allowances and so on is, just by referring back to this original book. Yeah, that's fairly self-explanatory. And then they have, I think it's 5 different army lists. So they have the Varangian Guard. The Varangian Guard, it gives you a little bit about their historical quite a bit about their historical background, actually. Lots of illustrations that they've either got from Wikipedia or from photographing their own miniatures or from Osprey publications. The armies will have their own special abilities and their own limitations, which is quite, nice little feature, with suggested warbands, but you're not obliged to stick to those. So the Varangians one army list, the Byzantines are another. Then you have the southern Italian principalities. They're kind of like Lombards, I suppose you could call them, but there's a mix of Normans in with those. Norman mercenaries anyway. Then you have the Normans proper, who took part in the fighting in, well, all over really, but partly in Sicily, but mainly they sort of helped with the rebellions in southern Italy against the Byzantines, and then took over and under their own steam later on. And also they fought in the Middle East as part of the Varangian Guard. And then you have the Muslim powers, which are mainly kind of sponsored by the Fatimids in Cairo. So they are the war bands, but then you can see how it's a lot thicker than your average Osprey publication. After that, you have a number of scenarios which are grouped into, there are 3 different scenarios, as I say, the Middle East, sort of the Holy Land itself, then Sicily and southern Italy. But so there are three of those, but which are campaigns, but inside each campaign there are 3 scenarios which you could obviously, if you wanted, transfer to others, and the scenarios obviously in Lion Rampant you can bring across, and the scenarios apparently which are in Lion Rampant, the Crusader States. So what I'm going to be doing is playing, because my troops are mainly sort of suitable for southern Italy, I'm going to play the first of the scenarios. Let's find it here. For fighting the Normans in Italy, which is this one here, and playing. Oh yeah, here's some of the characters you see that you can choose for that. So you have Harald Hardrada himself, he is a common theme throughout all the 3 campaigns, but specifically for southern Italy, you have quite a lot of Norman leaders or Byzantine characters that you can pick. So I'm going to be playing my Normans with the leader as Reinulf Drengot. More on him in a moment, but as you can see, he has a particular characteristic which differs from the original. It's new. It's not in the original Lion Rampant rulebook, and his characteristic is aggressive. So each turn, 1 unit within 12 inches of the leader's model can automatically pass an attack activation without needing to roll dice. So we'll see how that goes in the scenario. But the one I'm going to be playing is this one here, Massacre by the River Olivento. I'll show you more of the setup of that later on. But next up, I'll show you the figures that I'm actually going to be playing with. Right, here they are then, all just sort of grouped together on this lid, just to show you you'll get to see them again more closely during the game. But I'm going to be playing Normans on this side versus, I'm classing them as Varangian Guard, but in the rules the Varangian Guard mainly fought on foot, and to supplement them you have to use Byzantine forces for the cavalry and so on. So I'll just zoom in and show you, see if I can get slightly better, give you a bit better impression of what they're like. So there is the character who's going to be Reinulf Drengo. The Normans are going to have nothing but cavalry. For the supplement, it doesn't allow you any missile troops, unlike the massive number of bowmen and crossbowmen I've got to play Saga. So I can't actually incorporate them into an army for this supplement. But the scenario is basically after the defeat of the Byzantines, a small group are trying to retreat across the Olivento River. So it made sense to have a large cavalry contingent who would be pursuing the defeated army to the river. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of elite cavalry, which is actually 30 points. Now there's nothing to stop you playing with more. They usually say 24 points for Lion Rampant, but they encourage you to if you got the figures to put them on the table. So I've put 30 points there, and the Byzantine stroke Varangian faction is actually 34 points, and that is because the scenario requires a 4 point stronger force. So I've got 3 groups of elite infantry who are the Varangian Guards themselves. They're those 3 groups at the front there, and Harald Hardrada there. Then I've got a group of light infantry who are upgraded to being armed with javelins, so they're missile troops as well. Then I have a group of heavy cavalry who have been armed with bows, and then a group of elite cavalry, so they are the equivalent of the Norman elite cavalry, no difference in stats or anything like that. And the Byzantine forces, so those 3 groups there, I purchased pre-painted, really nicely painted. I got them from Colonel Bill's, painted by a chap goes by the name of Grasshopper. So if you see any of his work, as I understand it, spoke to the chap from Colonel Bill's at a show once, and he said Grasshopper occasionally, he paints figures for Colonel Bill's, but he occasionally sells his own figures through Colonel Bill's, so worth looking out for, definitely. He's a very good painter. Yeah, and so some of them, the the group that Harald Hardrada is leading have got another upgrade, which is fearsome, which normally it's an upgrade that's included in the supplement. Normally it would cost 2 points for a unit to purchase it, and it affects the opponent's courage when they're testing for courage after losing casualties in a melee. But the Varangian Guard are allowed to purchase it for only 1 point, so that will certainly take part in the game when we get to play it. So next up, onto the table setup. Right then, so this is like an overview of the table setup. It's quite plain, but you are supposed to keep a lot of open spaces on the table in this scenario, it suggests. So what's happening basically is there's a river off to the right of the screen there, and the Varangian Guard and Byzantines have just been defeated at the Battle of Olivento, and they are retreating. This is a small portion of the army which is retreating and attempting to get across the river. So their objective for the game is to escape. It doesn't have to be from the river edge, it could be from any table edge, but the Normans, who are the attackers, are allowed to come on any of the 3 edges that are to the west of the river. Now, they are the attackers, so they will get to go first, and with the exception of Hardrada's unit itself, which is the one in the very centre, all of the other units are battered at the moment. So in order to be able to move at all, they are going to have to rally off the battered tokens before they can do it, before they can actually receive orders, move, shoot, or attack, or whatever they want to do. In terms of the terrain, the sort of very rocky outcrops I'm going to have as impassable terrain, so nothing can actually go into those. There's a ford in the river, which you can't actually see at the moment, but halfway up the river there's a ford, which figures can cross at normal movement rate, but otherwise the river is considered to be rough terrain. And there's a marsh, which is rough terrain, and 2 hills on the table, which are rough terrain as well, and that's about it. So as the attackers, the Normans get to go first. So what I'll do is I'll just roll their dice to see how many come on, and then update you rather than film everything. So basically, in order to move, the Normans are going to have to roll on 2 dice 7 plus, and I've got 5 units to try and bring on the table. Okay, so the attacker's turn, and the Normans have managed to get 4 out of their 5 units on the table, which is pretty good going actually. I've rehearsed this scenario, and in the first turn of the rehearsal they only got 1 unit on, so that's Rainulf Drengo and his unit that's come on close to the river. So they are going to attempt to kind of cut off the exit via the ford. And then I've got another unit coming in from the other side here. Obviously the defenders haven't done anything yet. A third unit coming on here. And the fourth unit, fourth out of the 5, coming on here. So there's only 1 other unit to come on the table. So now in the defender's turn, I'm going to attempt to rally off the markers and probably not do much else. Rallying off a battered marker happens before the ordered activation, so it's all that the units can do in this turn, with the exception of the one in the centre. But I want to keep Harald Hardrada in the centre there, because he adds a bonus as the leader to any unit taking a courage test within 12 inches of him. So by keeping that unit there, it should make it easier for the others to rally off their markers. Right, so that was very successful. If you haven't taken any casualties, it's pretty easy to pass a courage test anyway. So all the defenders' units have now rallied off their battered markers, and Hardrada's unit could activate, but I'm choosing not to. So it's now back to the attackers, the Normans, and I'm going to roll for those and show you the result. But probably what I'll try and do is activate the units that were on the table first of all, and if they all pass their activations, then I can try and get the 5th unit on. But I'm thinking to begin with trying to activate these Norman cavalry to catch up with the light infantry there and attack them. Okay, not a very good turn for the Normans. That's all they succeeded in doing. So that cavalry is a little bit closer to the Byzantine light infantry. But the second unit I tried to activate failed its order, so it's back to the Varangians now to see what they can do. Right, so on the Varangian side, the light infantry passed the movement activation order, so they have formed up in a schiltron, which is one of their characteristics that they can do. So now when they're charged by the Norman cavalry, they'll have a better armour value than they would do otherwise, and a couple of other minor sort of advantages, but it will help them protect them from that cavalry. And a second unit was successfully activated, which was that elite unit of elite cavalry there. So they have moved further forward towards the ford, which you can see there, with the intention of kind of protecting that area and allow the other units to escape across the ford. But that was it. They then failed their next order, so back to the Normans again. Yeah, beg your pardon, there was one other unit that did pass a successful order, which was this unit of Varangian Guard here. So they are moving into this rough terrain, but they're not actually in it yet. And the purpose of that is that they have the ferocious characteristic, which means that they retain their fighting abilities in rough terrain, whereas normally that would sort of level out abilities, so that the attacking cavalry here will be fighting with lower values, but they haven't quite made it yet, and they are within striking distance now of that cavalry, which has the wild charge attribute, so they are obliged to attack, though before the order phase begins they are obliged to charge that cavalry, Varangian Guard, as are those infantry there now, are obliged, because they're within 10 inches of that unit, they are obliged to attempt to charge the Schiltron. Okay, so first thing I did then was to test for the wild charge there, and they did indeed pass the attack, so they are now engaged with the Schiltron. So I'm going to show you the dice roll for that and explain a little bit about how the Lion Rampant mechanism works for the people who aren't familiar with the rules. So both sides roll, because they're fully formed, haven't lost any, they're not down to half units, they both roll 12 dice. So I've got the Normans are in kind of orange and the Byzantines in white, and the Byzantines are defending, they will hit on a 4+, whereas the Normans are hitting on a 3+. Right, so Byzantines hitting on a 4+, so we can get rid of anything below 4, so they have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and get rid of anything below 3 for the Normans. So the Normans have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, the Normans have got an armour excuse me, of 4. That means for every group of 4 dice they receive 1 casualty, and you don't round up, you round down. So the Byzantines have managed to inflict 1 casualty on the Normans, whereas the Byzantine Schiltron has got an armour now of 3 rather than 2, because they're in Schiltron, which means for every 3 dice they lose a casualty. So the Normans have inflicted 3 casualties on them. So the first thing you do is remove the casualties. So I'm taking 1 off of the Normans and 3 off of the Byzantines, and then both sides have to roll, because they both received casualties, both sides now have to roll for courage. So we'll start with the Normans, which is probably going to be easier. So you roll 2 dice, they have rolled 5, you subtract any casualties, the number of casualties they've received so far, not just in this melee but in the game. So you take 1 off, takes it down to 4, and there isn't anything else that's going to boost their courage or anything like that. But you have to beat their courage score, and they have a courage of 3, so they have passed the courage test successfully. Now the light infantry have a courage of 4+, so they have to beat a score of 4. So they have rolled 7, and they have lost 3 casualties, takes them down to 2-4. But they are within 12 inches of the Harald Hardrada figure. That boosts them up again to 5. So they needed 4+, and they've done it. So they have both passed their courage tests, but because they're in Schiltron, even though they lost the melee, it is the Normans who are obliged to withdraw and retreat now. So they go back half their movement distance, which is 5 inches. Okay, so the Norman units retreated back 5 inches away from the Schiltron, and this unit here also passed its attack test, so it has made a wild charge against the Varangians and has caught them mainly out of the rough terrain. So that fight includes all the figures. You don't have to worry about having everything in base-to-base contact, but the majority of the Varangians are out of the rough terrain, which means it's being fought on normal ground. So again, I'll just show you the dice rolls for that. So again, both sides are rolling 12 dice. Now, the Normans need 3+ to hit, and the Varangians need 4+ to hit because they're defending. The Varangians need 4+ because they're defending. Normans need 3+ because they're attacking. So we'll take anything below 4 off the Varangians' dice roll. So they've not done too badly. And anything below 3 off of the Normans. They haven't done quite so well. So Normans have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hits, and the Varangians have got 8. So both sides have an armour of 4. That means that the Varangians have inflicted 2 hits on the Normans, whereas the Normans have only inflicted 1 hit on the Varangians. So again, we begin by taking off figures. And then, as both sides have lost casualties, both have to roll for courage. Start with the Byzantines. So they're all they have got courage. They've got the big factor of 3 plus 3 or more. So they've rolled 5. They've lost 1 casualty, takes them down to 4. And they're within 12 inches of Hardrada, so they've passed their test. And the Normans have got a courage of 3 as well. They've not done so well. They've got 4. They've lost 2 casualties, takes them down to 2. Now that is still above 0, so that means that they are battered rather than removed from the table. So they get a battered marker and they have to retreat 5 inches. Right, so there's the Norman unit withdrawn with a battered marker against them now, and the first of the ordered activations they failed, so that is their turn over now. So it's back to the Varangians to see what they can do, and I think what I'm probably going to do is start. They haven't got any wild charges or anything like that, battered, rallies to do, so they can begin with their ordered activation. So I'm going to start by trying to order this unit now entirely into the rough terrain, and that will give them a big advantage because they can fight with their normal capabilities in rough terrain, whereas the Norman cavalry, once they've rallied off that battered marker, will be within movement distance of them. Oh, actually, they probably will be within movement distance. You have to subtract a little bit for the rough terrain, which means they'll be obliged to charge them and be fighting at a huge disadvantage. So, in order to move, the Varangian Guard need 5+. I'll just roll some dice on the table here, see what I get. Roll double 1. So, failed completely. Ooh, where are they? There we go. Failed completely, which means that's the end of the Varangians' go. So back to the Normans. Yeah, actually I can revise that, because one of the added things in A Viking in the Sun is Harald Hardrada's characteristic, his leadership ability, which is commanding. I think this is also in the Lion Rampant itself. Commanding, each turn you may re-roll one additional failed move, attack or shoot test. Within 12 inches. Yeah, they are within 12 inches of your leader's model. So I'm going to re-roll that on dice, and we roll a double 1 again. Wow. Something wrong with those dice. So that definitely is the end of the Varangian Turn now. Okay, so we're in the pre-activation phase, if you want, of the Norman turn, and the first thing they have to do is attempt to rally off that battered marker, and they failed. And then next thing they have to do is test for wild charges, and they passed over there. So we're obliged to charge back into that Shiltron. So again, I'll show you the dice roll on that. So the light infantry are still above 6 figures, which is why they can still remain in Shiltron, and they still roll 12 dice. And they are hitting on 4s. And the Normans are attacking and hitting on 3s, I believe. Yeah. Right, so anything below 4 we can take off of the Byzantines. So they need to beat an armour of 4, so they have got 1 hit. And anything below 3 we can take off of the Normans, and they are attacking against an armour of 3, so they have got 2 hits. So same again, we take off appropriate number of casualties from each side. And then both have to roll for courage. So again, we'll start with the Normans. So the Normans have now lost 2 casualties. So that's pretty good. So they start with 10, they go down to 8. So they've easily passed the courage test. Whereas the Byzantines have now lost 5 casualties. So they start off, they're going to be alright actually, aren't they? Start off with 9, they go down to 4. And Harald Hardrada's within 12 inches of them, bumps them up to 5. And they needed to beat 4, so they're all right. So they haven't become battered, so they remain in Shiltron, and the Normans are obliged to retreat again. Okay, so the Normans failed their first order in the normal part of the activation phase of the of the turn. So it went on to the Varangians again, and they successfully passed the move order this time and managed to move that unit of Varangian Guard into the rough terrain. So that's going to have a pretty dramatic effect on the fighting against the Norman cavalry when they attack again. But then they failed on their next move to move their own elite cavalry. So it's now back to the Norman turn, and first thing you have to do is try to rally off battered markers. So we're going to roll to see if we can rally off that. Do that on camera as well. Okay, so they've lost 2 casualties. They've rolled 8, so that takes them down to 6, which is well above their courage level. So we can remove the battered marker, but that is all they can now do this turn. And then the next thing to do is there's a possible wild charge there. So we have to roll for that. So they have an attack value of 5+, so they have to roll more than 5 or more, and they will go in as a wild charge. And they've rolled a 4, so they have failed their wild charge, which is all they can now do for this turn. But it doesn't mean the end of the Normans' move, because they're now onto their proper activation series. So I'm going to try and move Rainolf Drengo's unit first, I think. That unit there. Try and get them a little bit closer to the elite cavalry there. So they have a movement value of 7+, so this is why it's proving a little bit difficult to move them. 8, so they can move. Right, so there's Rainolf Drengo having moved forward, and the Normans had a pretty good run of luck because they also managed to move this unit forward, putting them now within movement distance of these elite cavalry. So both these units are obliged to wild charge one another now. But the Normans got their 5th unit on the table there, so they are coming in as well. So they've now got all their forces on the table, and that's the end of their turn. So it's back to the Varangians now, and it's up to the wild charges first of all, because there will be a wild charge there, and the Normans have a counter charge ability. So depending on their success in the roll, they can choose to countercharge this wild charge. So they might meet somewhere in the middle, or if they fail that, they might have to defend, which means they're rolling slightly less well on the dice. Okay, right. So the Byzantines were obliged, they passed the test, so they were obliged to wild charge the Normans, but unfortunately for the Normans, they failed to allow themselves to countercharge. They failed that test, so they will be rolling as defence rather than attack in this ensuing melee. So we'll show you the dice roll on that. Right, so the Byzantines are hitting on 3+, but the Normans only on 5+. So they're in a little bit of trouble here. Right, so we can take out... no, actually, that's not a bad roll from the Normans' point of view. They have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hits. And the elite cavalry for both sides have got an armour of 4, so that means the Normans have inflicted 1 casualty on the Byzantines, and we take out anything below 3 for the Byzantines. Yeah, so they have done slightly better. They got 2 casualties. So once again, we start by taking off the appropriate number of casualties. So 1 for the Byzantines and 2 for the Normans. Both sides have to roll for courage, as they've both taken casualties. So we'll start with the Byzantines, who've lost 1. So they're fine. 8 minus 1 is... 9 minus 1 is 8. And the Normans have lost 2. So again, they're fine as well. So because the Normans lost more casualties, they have to retreat 5 inches. Right, there you can see the Normans have pulled back 5 inches from the Byzantines there, and then Byzantines went on to their normal activation phase and immediately failed their first dice roll, so it's now back to the Normans again, and they have 2 wild charges that they have to roll for. It doesn't really matter, they're both going to have to be rolled for, and failure doesn't end the turn. So got that one and that one. So I think we'll start here with this worst case scenario. See what we can do here. So the Normans attack on 5 plus. Yeah, so I'm hoping that they foul this. No, they don't, so they move in, and because, as I say, because the Varangians have the ferocious ability, they're still fighting with their normal fighting abilities in the rough terrain, whereas, I just have to look this up, yeah, the Normans are fighting with an attack and defence value in rough terrain of I've forgotten it already. I think it's 5. Yeah, it's 5, and an armour of only 2. So they're still, both sides are still rolling 12 dice because neither of them are below half strength. And so the Normans are hitting on 5 plus, and the Varangians' defence value is 4 plus, so they're hitting on 4 plus. So we take, for the Normans, we take out anything below 5. And the Varangian armour is 4, which means they have scored 1 hit. Because they got 1 hit, 1 casualty because they got 6 hits. And then the Varangians were hitting on 4 plus, so anything below 4 we can take out. And the Normans have an armour of only 2, so they have wiped out, because they've only got 4 figures left, they have wiped out that unit completely. The Varangians still have to take a courage test because they lost 1 casualty. And they're fine. So that shows you how cavalry can be really dealt with, especially by units that have the fearsome, not the fearsome, the ferocious characteristic. So that was a really good tactical ploy on the part of the Varangians there to lure those Normans to their destruction in the marsh. And unfortunately for the Normans, the one wild charge that they did want to go in there, they've just failed the roll. So that's the end of their possibilities of activating this turn. So now it's on to the normal activation for part of the game. And oh no, I tell a lie. Still have, because they are still within movement distance over there, the Normans are obliged to attempt to wild charge the Byzantines this time. So let's show you that on the dice tray on the roll here. So they have an attack value of 5+, and they rolled 8, so they will go in, and the Byzantine elite cavalry have a counter charge ability, so if they roll 5 or more, they can counter charge and meet halfway, and they do. So the two sides will be both using their attack rolls, and they'll meet halfway between one another. Okay, so both sides still rolling 12 dice each, and both hitting on 3+, with both on an armour of 4. So anything below 3 for both sides we can take off. So the Normans have inflicted 7 hits, which goes down to 1 casualty, and the Byzantines have done the same. So 1 casualty off of each. Both sides have to roll for courage, so the Normans have now lost they've lost 3. So 6 minus 3 is 3, and they have a courage of 3, so they've just got away with that. And the Byzantines have lost 1, so 5 minus 1 is 4, and they have a courage of 3 as well. So what do you do when it's a draw? I'll just find out. Yeah, it's the attacker who's obliged to withdraw. So I've pulled the Byzantines back 5 inches now, but now the Normans are down to 3, so they're down to half strength, which means they'll only be rolling 6 dice rather than 12 from now on. So because they're still obliged to make wild charges, they're now at a disadvantage over there. So now we can go on to the normal part of the Byzantine's turn, and I think I'm going to start by trying to move this heavy cavalry here that are armed with bows up to try and get within shooting distance, which is 12 inches of that cavalry there, whilst remaining outside of 10 inches, so that they don't get obliged to make a wild charge. The Normans would be making the wild charge. The heavy cavalry don't have that obligation. So movement for the heavy cavalry is on a 5+. And they roll a 10, so they can move. Yeah, sorry, getting myself in a muddle there, because it was actually the Normans' turn rather than the Varangians. So what I've done is I've adjusted the positions of the cavalry over there, and then I rolled to activate a Norman unit and failed on that. So I'm now going to say, rather than move those archers back, I'm going to leave them there, and say that was part of the Byzantine Turn, Varangian Turn. But really, I should have started by dealing with the wild charge over there, because you're meant to do that first of all. So let's do that next. So the Byzantines are obliged to wild charge the Normans. So if they roll 5+, which they don't, no, so this is working out fine in terms of the sequencing now. I've rectified my mistake, because we're now onto the normal part of the Byzantines' turn, so we can say that the cavalry rolled successfully to move, and now we want to do something about the rest of the units here. So I'm thinking that maybe I should move one of these two units here, or that one. I think we'll leave them in the rough terrain for the moment, and I'm going to move those guys with the blue cloaks closer to the Norman cavalry there to try and help out the Schiltron, which we're about to get wiped out if I'm not careful. So the elite infantry, which is what the Varangian Guard do, move on a 5+. And they do, they move, so I'm going to move those next. Okay, so the Varangians had a really good turn there, that they managed to successfully activate everything, and that was without using Hardrada's ability to re-roll a failed activation dice. So both the two units of Varangian Guard there have moved up to confront this unit of Normans here, and the Schiltron managed to, it can't move as a Schiltron, but that unit managed to move, so it had to break up its Schiltron formation, but it's managed to move, and being light infantry they can move 8 inches rather than 6. So now the Normans will be obliged to wild charge the Varangians rather than the elite unit. And that Varangian unit also decided to start moving them towards the ford, so they're moving out of the rough terrain. So the next thing to do now is, it's now the Norman turn, and they have a couple of wild charges they have to deal with, so I'm going to deal with this one first of all, which was likely to be the most disastrous for them because they're only rolling 6 dice now. So we can begin by activating them, seeing if they activate. Okay, so have to get 5 or more, and we don't want to attack, so hoping to get less than 5. No, so they're going to go in, and will the Byzantines be able to counter-charge? So they need 5+ as well, and they do, so they're going to meet halfway between the two units. So the Normans hitting on 3s, the Byzantines hitting on 3s, but now the Normans are only rolling 6 dice. Both sides have an armour of 4. So anything below 3 we can get rid of. So the Normans are reasonably lucky in that they managed to inflict 1 casualty. The Byzantines have inflicted 2 casualties. Okay, both sides have to take a courage test because they've both lost casualties. The Byzantines, we'll start with them. They are actually now down to half strength. That doesn't matter for this, but just to point that out. But they have lost 3 casualties now, so they're taking 3 off of this dice roll. Yeah, they're going to be fine. And the Normans have now lost 5. They're only down to 1 character left. So they were taking 5 off of this dice roll. And they're all right as well. Brilliant. Okay, so it's the single Norman figure that has to retreat because they took more casualties. Okay, now the other Norman potential wild charge, which would be against Harald Hardrada himself. So we don't really want to do this if we can avoid it. And we can't, so they go in. In this case, the Varangians don't have the counter charge ability, so the Normans will go straight into Harald Hardrada's unit. Okay, so that's the melee there. Normans are still above half strength, so both sides are going to be rolling 12 dice. The Varangians are defending though, so they're hitting on 4+, whereas the Normans are hitting on 3+, and both sides have an armour of 4. Right, so that looks like a pretty poor roll from the Harald Hardrada's crew. Yep, they've managed to get 4 hits, which is 1 casualty. Take off anything below 3 for the Byzantines, the Normans, and that means they have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So that is 2 kills for the 2 kills on the Varangians. Now, because the leader is in that group, normally the leader is the last one to come off of the last casualty to be taken off, but if you roll a double 1, it's a lucky shot and he's killed. No, so he's all right. So we take 2 off of the Varangians, 1 off of the Normans, which now puts them down to half strength, and we have to roll for courage for both sides. So the Varangians, first of all, they have lost 2. So, oh right, so 4 minus 2 is 2, but Hardrada gives them a bonus of 1, which is lucky because that's just enough to keep them from being battered. And the Normans have now lost 3 casualties in total. So 6 minus 3 is 3, and they don't have any bonuses to speak of, but again they've got a courage of 3, so they're all right. So in this case the Varangians took more casualties, so they are the ones that are going to be obliged to retreat, and they'll go back half move, which is 3 inches. Right, so that's the Varangians moved back, so now that's the end of the wild charge part of the Norman turn. So now they can get onto their normal activations, and the first thing I think I'm going to do is try to move the Normans on the right there closer to the they're outside of 10 inches, so they're not obliged to attack, but I want to get them closer to those archers in order to sort of sweep them away. So movement is 7 or more, and we roll 9. Yeah, so that's going to be possible to do. Right, there we are there. That's Reinhof Drango. Oh no, it's not. Yes, it is. Reinhof Drango and his unit moved a little bit closer. So there was one other Norman unit to move, and it failed, so it's back to the Varangian turn now. And first thing we have to do is there's still a situation where 2 units of elite cavalry are within charge distance of one another. So that unit there is obliged to roll and see if it wild charges the last remaining Norman figure there. So that will be on a 5+. 4. So they don't, which is, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing because the Byzantines are certainly winning over there. So now I think we're on to the normal orders now. So I think what I'm going to do is order the blue cloaked Varangians, or try and activate them to attack the Norman cavalry there. So in order to attack they have to roll 5 or more. And remember, I can always reorder, re-roll this because Harald Hardrada's within 12 inches of them. So they get 5, so they're fine, so they move in. Okay, so there they are. So now there's only 3 Norman knights left there. So the Varangians are going to be rolling 12 dice and the Normans only 6. Oh, yeah, something I forgot to do though is that the Normans have the countercharge ability. So if they roll 5 or more, they can countercharge. Yeah, they do. So I won't move the pieces back, but effectively they should have met halfway. So now both sides are hitting on 3+. The Normans would only have been hitting on 5+ had they failed that, which wouldn't have been good. So both sides hitting on 3+. So the Normans have inflicted 1 hit because the Varangians have got an armour of 4. And the Varangians have inflicted 2 hits. So just remove some figures before I forget those numbers. Okay, so we'll roll for both have to roll for courage, so we'll roll the Varangians first of all. Right, so they've lost 1, they've rolled 5, they've lost 1 casualty, takes another 4, and back up to 5 because Hardrada's close by. Whereas the Normans have now lost 5 of the 6. So they start on 5, they go down to 0, which means that they don't become battered, they actually get removed from the table. So that unit routes from the table. Right, so next up, I think I'm going to leave those Byzantine cavalry there because they do have a countercharge ability, so they won't be that disadvantaged in a melee. And I just wanted to show you how shooting worked really. So I'm going to try and order them to shoot at Rainulf Drengo's unit there. So in order to do that, they have to roll 6+. Easily, yeah. Okay, so they're similar to the attack in melee, that they roll 12 dice, and in order to hit, they need to get 5 or above. Right, well, they're lucky there in that they've managed to inflict 1 casualty, because because the Normans have got an armour of 4. Okay, so Normans have to roll for courage. So they've got to roll a 10, so they're going to be fine, so they've got courage of 3. Okay, so I carried on activating Varangian units until I failed. Well, I did fail once and got the re-roll, and then failed a second time. So Hardrada's unit haven't moved, but I thought I would try and move the light infantry off of one of the other table edges now that there's no longer a Norman threat up this side. So they're not obliged to cross the river, they can escape from any table edge. So I might try and move them off of the closer edge here. And this Varangian unit has left the rough ground now and is moving towards there. So now it's on to the Normans. They still have 3 units left on the table, one of which is only 1 figure. So there are 2 units that are obliged to wild charge. That one there and the less optimistic one over there. So we'll start with that one, see how we get on. Okay, so he will attack if he rolls 5 or above, which he does. The Byzantines excuse me, can countercharge if they roll 5 or above, which they do. So both sides meet in the middle. Okay, so both sides are now half strength or below, so they're both rolling 6 dice and both attacking, so both hitting on 3+ and both with an armour of 4. So the Byzantines have only got 3 hits, which means they don't kill that single figure, whereas the single Norman figure has got 5 hits, meaning they take off 1 casualty from the Byzantines. And therefore it's this is pretty good for the Normans, change of fortune. So it's the Byzantines who have to roll for morale, and they've now 4 figures, so 4 minus 4, and they're not within 12 inches of Harald Hardrada, takes them down to 0. So that brave Norman knight over there has actually won the day. So he's actually won the conflict and prevailed over the Byzantines. So I'm going to remove that unit entirely from the table now. Yeah, right, next up we have another wild charge there, and again the Byzantine heavy cavalry do have a countercharge ability. They're not as powerful as the elite cavalry, the Norman elite cavalry, but they do have an ability to countercharge, which will improve their chances in a melee. So we'll start by rolling to see if the Normans do go in with their wild charge. They do, because they got 5, and do the Byzantines countercharge? They do, so they both meet in the middle. Okay, so both sides rolling 12 dice. Normans are hitting on 3s, the Byzantines on 4s, and the Normans have an armour of 4, whereas the Byzantines only have an armour of 3. So anything below 4 we can take off for the Byzantines. Oop. So they have inflicted 1 hit on on the Normans. Anything below 3 can take off from here. So they have inflicted 2 kills on the Byzantines. Because the Norman leader, Reinulf Drango's in that unit, I have to just roll to make sure he isn't the casualty. Double one he would have been, but it's not. No, both sides have had casualties, so we have to roll for courage for both. So start with the Normans, who have to beat 3+. They've lost 2 casualties so far, so they're still going to be alright. 9 minus 2 is 7. The Byzantines have got a courage of 4+, and they've also lost 2 casualties. Right, so they've just done it. 6 minus 2 is 4. So because the Byzantines lost more casualties in that particular melee, they're the ones that have to retreat 5 inches. Okay, so that's the 2 Norman wild charges over, so there's only that unit there left to activate. And what I've decided to do with them is try and bring them along this table edge here to cut off the retreat of those javelin men, light infantry. So because this is a move and not an attack, they need to roll 7 or more, and they roll an 8, so I can move them along the table edge, and that will be the end of the Norman turn. Okay, so now the Varangian turn. And I think they are coming out on top on this. So my plan at the moment is to get these guys here off of the table before they fall below half strength, in which case they'll get more victory points for that. But they're obviously threatened by these Norman cavalry here. So what I'm going to do first of all is order these Varangian Guard unit here to move in this direction and get within 10 inches of the Normans, obliging them to wild charge the Varangians, leaving these guys free to move off the table edge. So the first thing I'm going to do is roll for that Varangian unit, which requires 5+ to move, and if I can do that. And also at the moment that unit, although you can't see it, are within 12 inches of Harald Hardrada, so they can re-roll this, so I should be able to manage this on 2 rolls, if not 1. Five, yeah, okay, so we've done it. So I'm going to move those first of all. Okay, so this unit's moved. Next up, the light infantry. I failed the first roll, but used Hardrada's proximity and his commander ability to re-roll. They then moved, and they can move 8 inches, so they're not far, probably 2 moves now away from the table edge. And then I failed another activation move, so that's the end of the Varangian turn. So now we're on to the Norman turn again, and they have 2 units which are obliged to wild charge now, this unit here and that unit there, and then the only other thing they have on the table is the single figure over in the distance. There he is. Over in the distance there, and I'm reluctant to do anything with him at all, because once that unit is lost, then I'm below half the points value of the retinue having left the table, in which case I have to roll for courage for the others, so it's better off to leave him on the table and just doing nothing for the moment, I think. Right, so let us start with the wild charge here. So the Normans will wild charge on 5+. Yeah, they roll a 5, so they do. The Varangians can't countercharge, so Normans move in like so, and then both sides are rolling 12 dice, and both, I think, oh no, yeah, the Varangians are hitting on 4, and the Norman cavalry are hitting on 3. Okay, so Varangian's sitting on 4, so anything below 4 I can take off. And anything below 3 from the Normans. Both got an armour of 4, so both sides have inflicted 1 casualty on the other. Let's take those 2 off. So both sides have to roll for morale. So we'll start with the Normans, who have lost 1 figure. Right, so they actually fail their morale because they've rolled 3, -1 is 2, meaning that they become battered. It's not below, it's not 0 or below, so they don't rout off the table, but that wasn't really what they wanted. So they have to move 5 inches back. Put a battered marker on them, and then the Varangians have to roll for morale as well. They've lost 3, so they roll 4, goes down to 1, so they have to retreat as well. They retreat 3 inches, and they're not within 12 inches of Harald Hardrada, so they can't claim a bonus for courage for him. And they too get a battered marker. Right, yeah, that wasn't brilliant. So next up, we've got to deal with that potential wild charge there. Okay, so 5+ and they go in. 7, they go in, and the Byzantine cavalry have countercharge. 5+, yep, so they can both meet in the middle. Right, so both sides rolling 12 dice. Norman sitting on 3, heavy cavalry, Byzantine heavy cavalry hitting on 4. I'm going to call that a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So Normans have inflicted 2 casualties. And so have the Byzantines. Yeah, 2 casualties off of both. Okay, I mustn't forget that there's a possibility of Rainulf himself being killed on a double 1. No, so he's alright, so 2 other casualties come off. Okay, and then we have to roll for courage for both sides. So the Byzantine heavy cavalry of 4+, and the Normans are 3+. We'll do the Normans first. So they roll a 10, They've lost 4 casualties, takes them down to 6, and they've got the leader present, so they're fine. The Byzantines have also lost 4. They're going to be off the table, so 2 minus 4 is minus 2, and then Harald Hardrada's nearby, but that's still minus 1, so they rout off the table. Okay, so we'll just pan around the table now. As I say, I'm not going to move that other Norman unit, so there were just the 2 wild charges, which ended up with a battered marker, where is it, there, on the Normans, and another one on the Varangians there, and a 2-figure unit now left there, but the Byzantine archers removed from the table entirely. 4 figures there, 5 figures there, and more than half strength with these light infantry as well. So as I say, it's looking as though the Byzantines are going to win more victory points than, or the Varangians are, than the Normans. But we'll carry on. I'm a little bit reluctant to do anything now with this. I don't know. I'm going to have to be a bit bold, but if the Normans lose 1 more unit from the table, then they're below half their retinue, so they'll suffer in courage tests from then on. But they can't just stand idly by and watch the Byzantines escape. So we're now on to the Byzantine turn, and the first thing we're going to do is activate these guys to try and get them closer to the table edge. Okay, so they will move on a 5+. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I'll count that as a success for them. But what I should have done first of all is attempted to rally off the battered marker off of the Varangian Guard. So they have a courage of 3 plus. So 5 minus 3, because they've lost 3 figures, is down to 2. So it all comes down to whether they're within 12 inches of Harald Hardrada's unit. And in all fairness, I think I have to say they're just out. So they fail that, but they're not. It's a positive score. So they don't get another battered marker, which is effectively to lose a figure. So they have to remain there, and then we're going to count that. I know it's a bit cheesy, but I'm going to count that other roll for the light infantry as having been a success and move them a little bit closer to the table edge. All right, there we are. So 1 more turn and they'll be off the table. So I'm going to try and I'm not going to bother trying to get them across the ford now. It's an easier task to get them off this table edge. So I'm going to roll for the other 2 units there, and remember I've still got the re-roll for Harald Hardrada if we fail one or the other. So both will move on a 5. So we'll do the ones in blue cloaks first of all. They've rolled a 5, yep, so they're going to be able to move, and then Harald Hardrada's unit rolls a 7, so they're both going to move a little bit closer to this table edge. Okay, now we're back to the Norman's turn, and first thing you have to do is rally off battered tokens, so you have to roll for courage for them, and then that 2-figure unit there, that figure is actually within 10 inches of the nearest model in that unit, so they will wild charge these afterwards. But first thing we've got to do is test for the battered unit's courage. So they've got a courage of 3. They rolled 5. They've lost 1 figure, takes them down to 4. So we can take that battered marker off. And then in terms of the wild charge, they attack on 5+. And they don't do it. They rolled a double 1. So they remain stationary, and now it's the normal part of their turn. So I think I will roll for that single figure, because there's no harm. He's well out of the action at the moment, so I might as well roll and see if I can move him a little bit nearer to the action. Yeah, so he's got to roll above 7 and he rolls an 8, so I'm going to move him a little bit nearer to the centre of the table. Right, so now we're back with the Varangian Turn. So first thing to do is to try and roll off that battered marker there. So they also have a courage of 3. They roll 8, they've lost 3 figures, is down to 5, so they're fine and they can take off the battered marker. And then next up, the normal orders. So the first priority is to try and get these guys off the table here. So they move on a 5+. And they move a 7, yeah, so we can move those off the table. Okay, and then the other 2 Varangian units both move on a 5+ as well. So I'm going to start with the blue cloaked ones to begin with. They pass, and then Harald Hardrada's unit, they pass, so I'm going to move both of those units there, closer to the table edge. Okay, right, so now we're on to the Norman turn again, and as I say, this figure here is within 10 inches of that figure there, so they have to roll to see if that unit will wild charge the Varangians. So they attack on 5+, and they do, and the Varangians don't have counter charge, so we just move the 2 units like that, and they fight a melee. They're both below half strength, or half strength or below now, so they're both rolling 6 dice rather than 12. And if I remember rightly, both are hitting on 3s. Oh no, yeah, the Varangians are defending, so they're hitting on 4s. So Varangians hitting on 4, Normans hitting on 3s. Ooh, let's roll that one in the tray. It was a 2 on the outside the tray, so that hasn't influenced things by doing that. So Varangians only get 1 hit, which is no kills, because the both sides have got armour of 4, whereas the Normans have got 4 hits, meaning 1 casualty. So we take casualty off first of all. And then only the Varangians have to test for courage, because they lost the casualty. They've rolled 7 and they lost 4 figures, so that's down to 3. So I think they're just about going to be all right, and they're within range of, they're within 12 inches of the leader anyway, so that would put them up to 4. So they pass the courage test, but they did lose the melee. So they are the ones that are going to have to retreat, and they will go 3 inches away from the attacker, which will take them to about there. And that means, I think, oh, it's tight. I think that figure there is just within 10 inches. It's very tight. Because that would then oblige them to wild charge, but I don't think they will. I think I'm going to say it's outside of 10. Not quite sure what the rule is if you've started your wild charge phase and a unit moves into wild charge range. during that phase. I'm not sure what the rule is, so I'm going to say it's outside of 10, and I'm going to try and move that unit across to around here to beginning to cut off the line of retreat there. So they will move rather than attack, which is 5+. They need 7+ to move, and they get it 7. Just get it. Right, so there are the Norman cavalry. In front of the line of retreat are those two figures there. I've moved the individual figure across a little bit more as well. So that will be the end of the Norman phase. So now it's up to the Varangians to decide what to do. They've got 3 units left on the table. They're all Varangian Guard units. My feeling is really that these two are within charge distance. They're not obliged to charge, but they're going to have to do some more fighting to get off the table. And if they had charged this group here, they'll be fighting against 12 dice, whereas if they charge there, they're both below half strength. So I think I'm going to order those to attack them, see how that goes. So that will need 5+ to succeed. And again, if I fail, I can always use Harald Hardrada's commander ability. So let's see what we get. 8, so they can charge the Normans that way. So both sides will be rolling 6 dice. Oh yeah, hang on. The Normans can countercharge if they get 5+. They don't. So they're going to be hitting on with their defence value, which is only 5. So the Normans are rolling 6 dice hitting on 5s, and the Varangians are rolling 6 dice hitting on 3s. Right, you can see that. So the Normans are hitting on 5s and haven't got any hits whatsoever. The Varangians are hitting on 3s and have got 3 hits, which doesn't equate to a kill because the Norman armour is 4. So neither side had casualties. So neither needs to roll for courage, and as it was the Varangians that attacked and it's an equal melee, they are the ones that have to retreat back 3 inches. Okay, so here are the Varangians having retreated back. So I've still got to activate these 2 units here. I'm beginning to wonder because Harald Hardrada is almost within 12 inches of Rainulf Drengo now. And there is this ability to challenge, leaders can challenge one another to a duel in the walls. I'm not sure whose advantage that would work to the best. I suspect because the Normans seem to be losing, it would probably be unwise for Harald to challenge Drengo, but maybe the other way around. So I'm just going to roll these 2 figures, see if I can get them nearer to the edge of the table and off the table. So we'll start with the blue cloaked figures again. They need 5+ to move. They get it, and Harold's unit gets 6, so they can both move a little bit closer to the table edge. Right, it's getting a little bit tactical towards the end of the game now. It's now the Norman turn. This Norman unit is within attack distance of both of those Varangians and Harald Hardrada's unit, and this unit of Normans is within attack distance of those. So they're both obliged to make wild charges, but I think what I'm going to do, even though these would be a massive advantage against them because they're rolling 12 dice against 6, I'm going to start by seeing what happens here. Because if the Normans can prevail over the Varangians, and they are rolling with their attack dice, whereas the Varangians will be rolling with defence, so they have got slight advantage, then I can use this unit against them So we'll start by doing a wild charge roll, this unit against that unit. So the Normans need to roll 5 or above. And they do, yeah. So they move in. So both sides are rolling 6 dice. The Varangians are hitting on 4 and the Normans on 3. Yeah, luckily that uncocked itself. You probably didn't see that, just on the edge of the camera there was one dice that looked like it was cocked, but it managed to stumble over. Right, so the Normans are hitting on 3s and the Varangians are on 4s. So the Varangians have only got 3 hits, which doesn't equate to a kill, and the Normans have got 5 hits, which equates to 1 kill, because it's an armour of 4. So we can take 1 Varangian casualty off. And then it's the Varangians you have to test for courage. So they rolled a 7. They have now lost 5 casualties, takes them down to 2. And luckily for them, they are within 12 inches of Harald Hardrada, which takes them up to 3, which is just enough to save them from being battered. So they will retreat 3 inches away from the attacker. And then now I've got to decide. I think I will still stick to my original plan of these Normans. They're allowed to, if they pass the test, they're allowed to choose any eligible target. So they're going to see if they test for a wild charge, and if they do pass, they're going to attack Harald Hardrada's unit. So they need 5+ again. Yep, they pass. So again, the infantry don't have counter charge, so they are going to attack that way. And in this case it's going to be 12 dice on each side. Okay, so Normans sitting on 3s, Varangians sitting on 4s. Varangians have done absolutely brilliantly, as you would expect from a unit led by Harald Hardrada himself, I suppose. So the Normans have inflicted 6 hits, armour of 4, so that equates to 1 kill, whereas the Varangians have inflicted 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, which equates to 2 kills. So 2 off the Normans, 1 off of the Varangians. There is still a possibility that it could be Harald Hardrada himself if we roll double 1. No. Right, so both sides have to roll for courage. Start with the Byzantines. So they rolled a 5. They've lost 3 casualties, takes them down to 2. But they've got Harald Hardrada with them, so that takes them back up to 3. And they've got bravery of 3. So they pass the courage test. The Normans are going to be fine. They roll a double 6. So they've lost 3 casualties, but they're well within their range. So that means that the Normans are the ones who are going to have to retreat because they lost the most casualties. So they go back 5 inches. And I think, oh yeah, I can roll. I'll just roll to see if that other single Norman knight gets any closer, because that's the wild charge is over. So on a 7+ he moves a little bit closer. No, and he rose to 5, so that's the end of the Norman turn. Right, now in the Varangian turn, I think the best thing to do is this figure is going to have to go down fighting, because at the moment he can charge this unit here. He's within 6 inches, so he can charge that unit and he'll be rolling 6 dice still against their 6 dice, but using his attack factor rather than defense, which means he'll be hitting on a 3. So rather than just wait to be attacked, I think he's better off attacking. So we'll do that first of all. And I've also got the commander ability allowing him to re-roll. So he needs 5+, and he gets 5. Okay, so he moves into the melee, and then it's 6 dice each. Oh, sorry, yeah, I keep forgetting this, but the Normans can countercharge, which they do. So just moving back a little bit, halfway. So both sides rolling 6 dice each, and both hitting on 3. So the solitary Varangian figure has got 4 hits, means he's got 1 kill, and the Normans have got 5 hits, meaning they've got 1 kill as well. So that does mean, unfortunately for the poor Varangian, that he is off the table as a casualty. That unit is completely destroyed now. The Normans potentially can lose the leader if they roll a double 1. They don't, roll a double 2, so Rainulf Drengo is now a unit on his own. He has to roll for courage. His unit does anyway, but he's the only one in it. So he rolls a 7, lost 5 casualties, takes it down to 2, but his leadership bumps him up to 3, so he survives. The Byzantines have now, let me just work this out points wise. Yeah, the Byzantines have now lost more than half their points with that single figure coming off. So when that happens, you immediately have to roll, each unit that's left on the table has to roll for courage. So we'll start with, there's only 2 units left now. Harald Hardrada's unit rolls a 5. They've lost 3 figures, takes them down to 2. Harald Hardrada bumps them back up to 1, so up to 3. So they're okay. And then the blue cloaked guys roll 8, so they're going to be fine. They've only lost 1 casualty, so they're fine. And we can carry on now with the Varangian Turn. So I think what we'll do first is roll for the blue cloaked ones to move towards the table edge. So they need 5 or more, and they rolled 11, and then see if they can move as well. Yep, they roll a 7, so they're both going to move towards the table edge. Right, so now it's the Normans' turn. The 2 Varangian units probably, 2 moves and they'll be off the table. And I've deliberately positioned Harald so he's more than 12 inches away from Rainulf, so that Rainulf can't challenge him to a duel. So first thing then in the Norman turn is that these guys are within 10 inches of Harald's unit, so they will have to oblige to test for a wild charge. Just move the camera a little bit so I can show you that. Okay, so on a 5+, they make a charge. Yeah, they make a roll of 8. So we'll move them into contact with Harald's unit. And then both sides are half strength now, so they're both rolling 6 dice. The Varangians are hitting on 4s, which is their defence value, and the attack value of the Normans is 3s. So the Normans hitting on 3s, Varangians on 4s. Unlike the last roll, the Varangians have scored no hits whatsoever. The Normans have actually managed to get 4 hits, which equates to 1 kill. So we just roll to see if it's a double 1, that's Harald himself. No, so we take one of the other figures off. And the Varangians have to test for courage. 7 minus 4 casualties is 3, plus 1 for Harald is 4. So they're fine, but they do have to retreat. So we just move them 3 inches away from the attackers. So they go this way. Yeah, what happens? I just have to look this up in the rules. 2 seconds. Yeah, I think for simplicity's sake, I've just moved them slightly in that direction, because if they get within 3 inches of this unit, then there's potential for them to lose. They're not allowed to do that, so there's potential for them to lose more casualties. But I think it's reasonable to say they'd go that way. I'm not going to sort of bother with that too much. So that was the wild charge of the Normans, and now the Normans can roll for the other 2 units still left on the table. So Drengo there, and him there. So both will be moving on a 7+, so we'll do Drengo first of all. Yeah, he gets an 8, and the other figure gets an 11, so they can both move closer to the action. Now, back to the Varangians. They've just got these 2 units left. If he wanted to, Harald could actually get to the edge of the table now. But I don't think he's going to be willing to leave this unit on its own. So what I think I'll do is this unit, I'm going to say this unit has spotted Drengo on his own now, so they're going to attempt to charge Drengo, because they will have a significant advantage in a melee over him. So they need 5+ to attack, which they get, and Drengo will be much better off counter-charging if he can. Needs 5+, yeah, he does. So both units are attacking one another, but the Normans are only rolling 6 dice, whereas the Varangians are rolling 12. And they're both hitting on 3s with an armour of 4. Right, so Drengo didn't manage to inflict any casualties, but the Normans have inflicted 2, so Drengo himself dies. And when a leader is killed, the other units left on the table have to roll for morale. So that's pretty dramatic, really. The single figure rolls a 7, but that unit has lost 5 casualties. So he's still on the positive side, so he doesn't leave the table, but he does become battered. And I think moves away from the site of Drongo's death, probably. So we'll move him back 5 inches away. And he is now battered. And then the other unit has lost 3 casualties. So 10 minus 3 is 7, so they're going to be fine, so they're all right. Okay, and then what we'll do, I think then, is, as they seem to be on a roll now, Harald Hardrada's unit is going to roll to see if he can attack the unit of Normans there. So needs 5 plus. Yeah, rolls a 6, or 7 rather. Normans are going to see if they can countercharge, which they can. So just meet halfway between the 2 movements. And both sides rolling 6 dice, sorry for kicking the camera. Both sides rolling 6 dice, both hitting on 3s with an armour of 4. Right, the Normans have got 1 kill. Varangians made an error there in that they haven't got any. They've got 3 hits, which doesn't equate to 1 kill. So double 1 and it's Harald Hardrada himself. No, so it's the other figure. And Hardrada's now left on his own. And because that unit lost the casualty, they have to roll for morale. They've lost 5 casualties and they only rolled a 6, meaning they're down to 1. And Harald Hardrada only bumps it up to 1, so they only have 2, and they need a courage of 3. So they are battered now. It's still a positive number, luckily. So he will move 3 inches away from the charge again, or the attack, and gets a battered marker. So can't do anything next turn other than try and rally off that battered marker. And that is the end of the Varangians go. So now we're back to the Norman turn. So the Normans are obviously within wild charge distance of both units, so they're clearly going to want to go for Harald. So let's roll to see if they need a 5 or more. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to look up what happens when battered units are in melee. Okay, the rule for battered units in melee is that they only hit on a 6. So these 3 Norman knights are going to charge down Harald Hardrada, and both sides are rolling 6 dice. But the Normans are hitting on 3s, and Harald Hardrada only hitting on 6s. Right, so Harald Hardrada's got 2 hits, which isn't enough, and the Normans have got 4 hits, which is enough to kill poor old Harald, so he goes down fighting. And that means that the last unit on the table there has to roll for morale. I think there's another rule about, I've forgotten about, when you get down to so many units as well, you have to roll for morale. But I've forgotten to do that, and I forgot to do it for the Normans as well, so we'll ignore that. But definitely with a leader dying, everything left on the table has to roll for morale. Okay, so they've only lost 1 casualty. They're going to be fine. They rolled an 11. Right now, I'm beginning to forget where I am now. I think that was the Varangian Turn, wasn't it? If I remember rightly. No, that was the Norman Turn, and they did a wild charge. So I should have also, before I did the wild charge, I should have rolled to see if I rally off that battered marker from the single knight. Which I don't, because they rolled a 6 and he's lost 5 casualties, so they've failed to rally off the battered marker. So now we're back to the Varangian Turn, and it's definitely within the interests of those Varangians to attack those Normans, because they'll be rolling 12 and those only 6 dice. So they need 5 plus. They get it, and the Normans would want to countercharge, which they do. So they kind of meet halfway. So it's 12 dice for the Varangians, hitting on 3s, and 6 dice for the Normans, hitting on 3s. Right, so the Normans have got 4 hits, which equates to 1 kill. And the Varangians have got 8 hits, which equates to 2 kills. So I'll just take some figures off temporarily. That means that both sides have to roll for morale. We'll start with the Varangians. They roll 9 and they've lost 2 casualties. That takes them down to 7, so they're fine. Normans have lost 5 casualties. They rolled a 7, that takes them down to 2. So it's not a negative number, so they just have to retreat 5 inches, and they have a battered marker. And that is the end of the Varangian Turn, I think. Yeah, so it's getting fairly simple to play this last few rounds of this game out now. So there are 2, it's now the Norman Turn. Both of them have battered markers which they have to try and rally off. So we'll do the one on the table edge here first of all. He rolls 5 and he's lost 5 other figures from the unit, and that would mean he's down to 0, which means he's battered on top of being battered, which means you lose another casualty, and as he's the only figure, that figure comes off the table and that unit's completely eliminated. And oh yeah, there they are. And then the other single figure, standard bearer guy, he rolls 9 and he's lost 5, so he's down to 4, so he is all right for the moment. So the game struggles on. Now, again, I'm losing track of where I am in terms of whose turn it is. I think it's unlikely now that the we're going to be able to stop those Varangians getting off the table, because there's only that solitary knight there. So let's say it's the Norman turn again, and he has to roll to see if, all he can do is roll to see if he gets that battered marker off. 6 minus 5, yep, so no, he fails to get the battered marker off, but he's still on the table. And then the Varangians need 5+ to move. They fail. So it's back to the Normans. Yeah, he rallies off the battered marker, but that's all he can do. Then back to the Varangians, 5+ to move. Yep, they get a 5, so they move 6 inches, which is not quite enough to get them off the table. They're very close to a couple of inches from the edge now, though. So the Norman knight can now try and move on 7+, and he fails. So the Varangians need 5+ to move off the table. And they get it, so they are off the table. So that is the end of the game. So now we've just got to work out victory points. Right, so there's one figure left on the table at the end of the game. It's that solitary Norman figure there. And just working out the victory points, basically the Normans get 2 victory points for each unit that they rout or destroy. And there were 4 Byzantine stroke Varangian units that were routed or destroyed, so they get 8 victory points. The Varangians get 2 points for each unit over half strength that comes off the table, and there were 2 units that were over half strength that left the table, so they get 4 victory points. So in other words, the Normans win the game 8 points to 4. So it was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, as testified by this is one man left standing on the table, but that was a Norman victory. So that's my Batrep on Lion Rampant, a Viking in the Sun supplement. An enjoyable game. Lion Rampant is an enjoyable game to play, and I'm really glad that there's this supplement out now which allows me to use a lot of these figures that didn't really match the period for Lion Rampant proper. It's a sort of slightly set in a slightly later period than this, so it's a good excuse to get figures out on the table and play with them. And hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you on another video. Bye for now.